When we first set out to full-time on our RV, we got some funny looks from a few people. A few people going,
Aren't you a little young for that?
there's this idea that RVing full-time is only for retired people. And maybe that was once the case. I don't know if it's ever been only for retired people or for people who are 55 plus, but there was a time when that was predominantly the case. However, with the rise of remote workers, which we both are, it has become increasingly more common for people who are younger than 55 who are working to hit the road full time and see the country and live as nomads. Now, that said, it does come with some pros and cons. And today I'd like to talk about some of the things I wish I had known going in about the pros and cons of choosing this lifestyle when you are not 55 or older. Because Justin and I are not, we are both in our 40s. I'll start with the cons. So the first con is a big one, and that's that we can't get into 55 plus parks. I've talked about this in another video, but there are a number of RV parks that are limited to stays by people who are 55 or above. And I think it primarily has to do with the fact that the government subsidizes affordable housing for people that are 55 plus, so those RV parks get a stipend. There's also a higher demand for that, especially in places like Florida and Arizona where there are a lot of snowbirds. In addition, I do know that a lot of RV park residents who are 55 plus enjoy there not being loud parties or screaming children or things that tend to happen more in campgrounds that are open to all ages. But it's hard if you're not 55 plus. It can be hard sometimes to find a place to stay, especially if you are in Florida and Arizona. The second con of being younger and doing this is that we have to work. We're not retired. We don't have passive income or a sale of a large house or anything that we're living off. We don't have that nest egg. And because we have to work, we have to consider that in our booking and our sightseeing. We are constantly planning around work. It actually makes the planning aspect of RV life a lot more difficult. The third thing is that you can have some limited social opportunities. A lot of our neighbors are older. Now, I like older folks and I enjoy socializing with anyone, but it can be odd if you're not used to socializing with older people, or if older people are not interested in socializing with you, which I have run into. It can get a little lonely on the road. And there's some other things too to think about if you're under 55. These haven't affected us as much, but I wanted to include them in order to give the full picture. If you're younger, you might have more financial constraints. You don't have time to build up that money, so you have less of a nest egg if things are going to happen. In addition, depending on what you do for work, this doesn't apply to us so much because we are both full-time remote workers. It just kind of happened that way. But if you aren't, if you have to go into a different career, it might interrupt your natural career progression and limit long-term growth in your career. So it can be very financially costly to get into this earlier as far as future career potential and income growth and all those things. Another one is if you have young children and you're trying to parent them. We do not, but if you do, then you have to take on the responsibility of homeschooling and all that. You can't necessarily just, send them to a school district, and it can also interrupt their forming their social networks and bonds with friends because they're going to be on the road. They're not going to have, a stable group of kids at a school to play with. And finally, Justin is very handy, and I am a good helper. But if you aren't handy and you don't have a wealth of experience for maintenance and repairs, and you haven't had the experience of doing a lot of auto repair or home maintenance because you're younger and you're starting out, that can make RV life a lot more stressful. Okay, that was kind of a bummer, but I wanted to be realistic. Let's talk about the pros. The first pro is a big one, and as I talked about in an earlier video about why I chose to be a nomad, this was a big factor in my decision making. By RVing full-time under 55, it ensures you actually get to do it. Here's the thing, nothing is promised. I talk about this in another video, but my father and my mom had dreamt of full-time RVing, and unfortunately my father got sick and passed away before that was possible. In addition, my sister passed away at the age of 46 suddenly, and you never know how much time you have. So if you're waiting to do something, you might not get to do it. So by doing it younger, it ensures you get to do it. I know that's morbid, but it's a thing. It's a thing. It's something to consider. We don't know how much time we have. We don't know how much longer we'll be in good health. It's an unfortunate reality, but it needs to be said. The second pro of RVing under 55 is you have the energy to do things, to go out and be active. This was actually something that was told to me by my mother. I'm not trying to be rude here, because I was like, is it weird that I'm doing this so young? She's like, no, you have the energy to go out and do this and kind of hit your bucket list really fast. So because we're a little younger, we have that energy, it does help us. And we're able to balance work and sightseeing well because of that. It helps mitigate the con of having to work. I mean, we're in our 40s, so we have some energy, not as much as we used to. We're middle-aged, so to speak, but it does help. So we can go on hikes, and we have gone on hikes, and we've had a good time. Now, there are people who are older than me that have more energy or better shape than I am, so it's not to cast aspersions, but it is one factor in having energy is age. Other thing is that being younger, there's this flexibility and freedom. So you might have fewer connections. Now we're at the point in our lives where we're pretty established. We have careers, we have all that. We don't have children, but a lot of people our age do. It's actually unusual that we don't. You know, if you were setting out, you're young, and you go and do this, you probably don't have kids, you might not have work obligation. You could do it at a time when you don't have a lot of obligations and you don't have to plan as much as we do. Another thing is that we are very tech savvy. Again, this is something that isn't necessarily a one-to-one associated with age, but typically speaking, some of the younger generations are more comfortable with technology. It's more natural. It's been part of our existence. And having tech savvy can help you a ton. I will say that tech savvy is, again, not a one-for-one thing. I'll tell you, my grandmother is more tech savvy than my mother, for example. So it all depends on the person, but it is very easy for us and very natural for us to use the technology that we need to use. Scouting things out to do in the area, travel planning, all that good stuff. In an earlier video, I talk about ways to use AI to enhance your travel experience. That was a very normal, intuitive thing for me to do. Another reason it's a pro is because we've started younger, we'll be able to RV for a longer period of time. So that's a perk. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I'm having a blast, even with the slight hiccups in the experience, even though it's a weird thing to do. I've learned so much. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I don't actually at this point really care if it's weird. I know it's weird. I am so glad we did this. And I think more than 55 plus versus not 55 plus, any sort of age thing, I think the most important part is to do it when it makes sense for you. And I'm glad we did. We did that. It's been awesome. You know, don't force anything. I think that's part of the key to happiness in life is being clear-eyed about what makes sense and what doesn't, and not to force things one way or another, just to do what makes sense, make a reasoned decision. It's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.